know, what happens to Orthodoxy in the West, or the Orthodox Catholic faith. Of course, you can trace some of it to you can trace almost all of it to Hildebrandianism. What you can't Now this is an interesting point. Hold on, Father Mark Templet writes, "I'd like to see the Western Rite from an ontological point of view." Um, okay, that's an interesting way to phrase it. But what do you mean specifically? Because when we're talking about are you talking about what Western Rite is like now, or what it was like then? Because, I mean, effectively, if you're referring to, and this is just to answer this, if you're referring to, like, in reality how it worked then and how it works now, you're kind of going to be confronted with a few different answers. The proper and the only orthodox answer is effectively that the pre-schism usages, being largely frozen in time, can simply be reused. And in practice, that's what they do at the Abbey. And that's the easiest way to restore Western Rite Orthodoxy, even though that requires a lot of psychological jumps that a lot of people are not ready for. Ironically, I think that it's okay. In other words, its function in working in the here and now. That's a good question. I would say that there's a missionary dimension to it, but I think that the target mission-wise has been to the wrong people. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the early Western fathers, etc., speak in a language that is not wholly inaccessible to Westerners in general. And by this may surprise you in my saying this, but I'm even referring to Low Church Protestants, and liturgical Protestants. A lot of them bear a great deal of familiarity with St. Augustine. The liturgical readings properly in the Western Rite are things that would actually, to some degree, be familiar with them, even if everything Orthodox that we know of is not. The reason why I specifically chose to talk about Low Church Protestants is because they don't have built-in understandings of what they think Western Orthodoxy should be. If we were to do that, because the Western Rite experiment, for lack of a better word, over the past 100 years, has formed two different streams. And so from our perspective, we use the fully Orthodox and Pre-Schism Western Rite, which, when used fully and done properly, it's not even not offensive to an Orthodox Christian. It proclaims orthodoxy. However, when most people think of Western Rite Orthodoxy, and this is where I feel like we really have to kind of be kind of in the midst of this, when most people think of Western Rite Orthodoxy, they think of something that looks pretty much like Roman Catholicism or Anglicanism. It's hard to even explain that to, for example, my wife. I was talking to her earlier today, and one of the things that came up was the misunderstanding of what Western Rite Orthodoxy properly done is. And so, because she's used to the services that we have at the Abbey, the Western Rite services that we've done, it's all pre-schism, proper Orthodox stuff. You have your icons, you have your incense, you have your litanies, you have your prayers, you have your chanting. But all the other stuff that you normally, when people think of Western Rite Orthodoxy, they think of, we don't have. We don't do ridiculous things like rosary hours and St. Francis statues and the Stations of the Cross. There are all these Roman Catholic-y things that you will find in what are purportedly Western Rite Orthodox churches. But my wife thought this was kind of inconceivable because of the fact of what our experience was. And so ultimately, when I started showing her pictures and stuff, she's like, that just looks like Roman Catholicism. And that is what most people think we do, which we don't. And so this is, I hope that can kind of answer the question, but in terms of how it functions now, it functions, in the same way any other Orthodox church services function. We have like what are called the commons, which are sort of like the, it's the General Menaeon. And so we can construct Western Rite services for St. Seraphim of Sarov. We have them for St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco. It's an 8-tone musical system. So a lot of it's kind of plug and play, and this is one thing that does surprise people. Is hold on, let me see here. What would your answer be to those who say you want to be Orthodox, but our Eastern Rite isn't good enough for you? I would answer and say, you want us to become Orthodox, but our Western Orthodox fathers aren't good enough for you. One of the things that people don't keep in mind is that even liturgical, even patristic translations of Western fathers, most famously, the best examples are St. Gregory the Great. He makes references to uniquely Western services, which would either have to be explained in a footnote or mistranslated in order for them to even make sense to an Eastern reader, because these are not services that are done in the East. So the point is, even when we're talking about Western fathers, if we want to be honest about what they're doing and we want to properly understand what they were doing, you have to have at least a slight understanding of the Western Rite. This is part of the reason why when Father Seraphim Rose, blessed memory, did the Vita Patrum of St. Martin of Tours, he had to include literally 60 pages worth of descriptions of what Western Orthodox practices were, because without them, they wouldn't have made total sense to the reader. So this is part of the reason why it is important. I don't ever want to denigrate the Eastern Rite. I was born and raised, for lack of a better word, when I was baptized into the Eastern Rite. I have nothing but love for the Greek and Russian traditions. I believe I can perform them fairly competently. That said, well, not both, but the point is, that said, I've also spent long enough time in the Orthodox Western Rite to appreciate it, but more importantly, to understand why people don't like what most people think of when they say Western Rite, because I know exactly what you're talking about. When you say Western Rite to most people, give me just one moment. When you say Western Rite to most people, to most Orthodox people, in general, what they think of is, okay, let me see if I can find a bigger picture. Yeah, this I think will do fine. When most people say that when most people mention Western Rite, they usually think this. From our perspective, that is basically a Roman Catholic parish. I mean, that is a gigantic Roman crucifix thing, and it is. This is just literally it's a Western setup. I think this one is actually a slight improvement, but I've seen other ones where it's a literal Baroque altar smashed up against the wall, which is a 12th century innovation. Even the liturgical directions in a Pre-Schism Western Rite service presume a freestanding altar that you're going to cense around. So the point is that even this would be considered unacceptable for us.